Thanks, Glenda. What I heard from that introduction is that I have permission to be the boring guy, which I appreciate. So, because I have no sense of humor.
Not.
So, I'm going to start out here, and then I'll tag it off to Andy, and then we'll take questions. But imagine
Here's
with
Brian.
Me, thank you very much. Imagine with me for a moment that you own a convenience store. One of your employees mops the floor and leaves it wet and fails to put out the little, wet floor sign. You have a customer that comes along, slips and falls, seriously injures herself, and you're clearly at fault. What's to keep you from being sued for all that you're worth? Well, you have a number of tools in your tool chest for that, but one of the principal defenses you have is your limited liability company. So I'm going to talk about a couple of legal issues as far as forming an LLC, but there's two main reasons that people form an LLC. And one of them is to protect your personal assets from your business's liabilities. So there's certain legal aspects. And then there's also tax issues to consider, and Andy's going to handle those. So doesn't it just give you goosebumps to feel, to talk about the law in your business? Isn't it just exciting? Or a pit in your stomach, maybe, I don't know. So, as a business lawyer, I see a number of mistakes that business owners commonly make when it comes to your limited liability companies, and I'm going to talk about three of them. So first is business owners fail to operate their business completely through their LLC. Second, they don't sign their contracts properly. And third, they don't register their DBA or registered or fictitious name properly. So let's say Brian Rogers, attorney at law, operating as a sole practitioner, a sole proprietor. And I'm concerned that someone might slip and fall at my office and sue me for all I'm worth. So I think, let's form an LLC. So I go to the website of the Missouri Secretary of State, I fill out the articles of organization, pay my $50 filing fee, and they issue a certificate of organization. So now I've got an LLC. Am I protected? No. What I have now is a sole proprietorship over here, and I have an empty LLC that's doing absolutely nothing over here. So in order to get protection from my LLC, I need to do two things. First, I need to transfer my business into the LLC, and second, I need to operate my business completely through the LLC. Now, when I represent sole proprietors and help them convert their business into an LLC, what I use in order to transfer their business assets into the LLC is a contribution agreement. And it's a simple one-page agreement, and it's sufficient for most types of assets. So here you can see I've got, in my business, before I organize it as an LLC, I've got a checking account with some money in it. People owe me money, so I've got accounts receivable. There's office furniture, computers, other equipment, contracts, and all that. So I need to put all of those things into the LLC. And then after that, I have to recognize that the LLC is a separate person from me. And everything that I do business-wise, I need to do through the LLC. So the LLC needs to have its own bank account, write its own checks, it needs its own credit card, it should have its own insurance policies, and it should be the party to all of my business's contracts. And I often see business owners who kind of mix and mash their operations, so some of it's personal, some of it's business, some of it's through their LLC, and some of it's not. And that's a dangerous way to operate because you could leave yourself open to potential liability, and your LLC is not going to protect you the way it should. So that's the first type of mistake I see. And then a second mistake is not signing contracts properly. Now, LLCs come in two flavors. One is manager managed, the other is member managed. And this distinction is so important that it's one of the few items of information that every LLC is required to put in their articles of organization when they create their company. And what's the difference and why is it significant? Well, a member managed LLC, the authorized people who are authorized to act on behalf of the company, sign contracts and whatnot, are the members. In a manager-managed company, that authority has been delegated to one or more managers. And so if you are signing a contract on behalf of your manager-managed company, as member, you're not doing it right. I see a lot of contracts signed as founder or owner or member, and it's a manager-managed company. Those aren't correct, and it leaves open the possibility that you won't have the protection that you think you have. So I've put up here on the slide an example of a good signature block for my firm. So the name of my firm is Blue Maven Law, LLC, and clearly, if you look at the signature block, that is the party to the contract, and I am acting, when I sign that contract, solely as an agent of the company. Since my LLC is a manager-managed company, I'm signing as manager. If it were a member-managed company, I would sign as member, like that slide. And I see this mistake quite often, and it's important to make sure that you sign your contracts properly. And then the last and also, for a little bit of self-promotion here, I've written a couple of blog posts that provide more information about this. One is how to sign a contract. I've got several examples of signature blocks and other information about that. It's a really old article, so it's deep in the pages of my blog, but if you just Google how to sign a contract, it should show up probably on the first page. And then a more recent article is which flavor is your LLC, and that talks about the difference between manager-managed and member-managed LLCs and why that's important. And that's on my firm's website, and it's a pretty new article, so it's on the first page of the blog. So the third mistake that I see often is people don't register their DBAs correctly. In Missouri, it's actually a misdemeanor to do business through using any name other than your actual legal name of your company. And so what the law requires you to do is register any fictitious name or DBA that you're using with the state. And so here's a shot of mine I took off the Secretary of State's website. So you can see down here, or over here, the owner of the DBA is my LLC. And what I see entrepreneurs do often is they put their own names on there and not the names of their LLCs. Well, if I were to sign, you can see the DBA here is Blue Maven Law without the LLC. If I were to sign a contract, Blue Maven Law, and I had a fictitious name registration and my name is the owner, it looks like I'm doing business as a sole proprietorship. And there have been recent cases in Missouri that have held entrepreneurs who own LLCs liable individually, personally. Their personal assets are at risk because they did their fictitious name registration wrong. So it's very important to do that right. So to recap, 3 mistakes I see a lot. Be sure to operate your business solely through your LLC, sign contracts correctly, and if you have a fictitious name registration out there with you individually as the owner, cancel that thing because it's a lot of risk for you. And with that, I'll hand it to Andy.
Well, thank you. Oh. So there we go. Thank you, Brian. So what Brian is saying is you are one thing, your LLC is something else entirely. So you need to operate at arm's length with your LLC. Now the arm's only about this long, but you still have to have the appearance of having that separation. It's kind of like at the sock hop, those of us that are old enough to remember that. When you did slow dancing, they always wanted to see space in between. Okay. So here's where we're going to get confusing, and I'm going to kind of rapid fire some things. These are awarenesses. You don't need to remember them. Yes, you do need to be aware that they're out there. So for the state, what we have is an LLC. For federal and tax purposes, there is no such thing as an LLC. Isn't that wonderful to know? So there is no LLC tax returns. There's partnerships, there's corporations, there's individual tax return fiduciaries, but no LLC. So an LLC is kind of a little different in that you have to determine what you want to do as far as tax purposes go. And there's ways that there are advantages and disadvantages that need to be considered. And let me just say, I'm a professional, don't try this at home, okay? So what we're looking at for as far as the tax return of your LLC, you've kept it separate like we've talked about. You can elect to be taxed as a corporation, and the corporation can either be a C corporation, which means the corporation pays tax on the income, or you can make an election to be an S corporation where the income from the LLC passes through to the shareholders and they pay tax on the income. Now, if you don't make that election to be a corporation, then if there's multiple owners, it's automatically considered a partnership. If it's a single owner, then it's a disregarded entity. So a disregarded entity means if you as an individual own an LLC, you're the only owner, you're going to report that on your 1040. If a corporation owns the LLC, all the members' interest, then they're going to report it on the corporate return. So it's disregarded, but just remember, for tax purposes, you may be a partner or a shareholder, but for state purposes, you're a member or a manager. Like I say, it's a little confusing, and you need to be very clear about which hat you're wearing. Are you wearing the owner hat? Are you wearing the manager hat? Are you wearing... Be very clear in your actions on what you do. So some of the things that you want to consider in which of those you want to be taxed as or file as is there's some issues with payroll taxes and self-employment tax. That can make a huge difference as far as paying Social Security and Medicare on the amount of money that you earned. And again, get with a professional on this because that can more than cost you for not doing it. There's specific health insurance rules for the different kinds of companies that you will want to consider. You may want to have some flexibility in how you split the profits. Okay, one person brought in all the money, the other person's providing the service. Well, okay, if there's a loss, maybe we want to have the individual that put the money in be able to take all the losses. Well, you can't do that as a corporation, but as a partnership you could. So there are some considerations you'll want to look at. There's formalities. If you're filing, if you're an individual, you still have the same formalities in LLC, but there's some things that you will probably want to do as far as doing your separation and differentiation between, okay, this is how I get paid. This is how I get reimbursed for my auto expense. This is how we do things in the company. And again, the cost of operation, if you're having a separate entity, you're going to have a separate tax return. But many times the benefits far outweigh the costs. So what you need to do is keep them very, very separate and do that financially, okay? Keep separate bank accounts. All business deposits go into the business bank account. All personal deposits go in the personal bank account. You know, your gift from Aunt Clara is not going to go in the business account. It's going in your personal account. So if you need money from the business, which hopefully your business is making money, you're going to transfer money over to the personal account and then pay your bills over here. If your business isn't making money and the business needs some money and you have it in personal, then you'll do a transfer over. And that could be a loan. It could be any number of things. Again, talk to your professionals on that. So again, Brian talked about the signatures, and then you want to take a look at your insurance. You want to make sure your insurance is in the right name. If you're using your car for business, you want to make sure that perhaps you're covered if you run the bus off the road with all the school kids. You want to make sure that if it's on company business, does your insurance policy cover you for doing business if it's in the personal name? You'll want to talk to your insurance agent, such as Sean Harden back there. So at this point, we know there's a lot of material that Brian and I have both covered. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to questions right now, because there's always a lot.
This is for Brian. I'm a registered DBA, and some of my newer clients only know me as what the DBA is. So on a contract, would I put the LLC and then add the DBA?
Yes. I would refer you to this wonderful blog post called How to Sign a Contract, which addresses that very issue. But yes, you should sign using your legal name and then DBA, the name of your DBA. But never sign just your DBA. You should always sign if you're a sole proprietor, you should sign your own legal name. If you're doing business through an LLC or something else, you should sign using the name of your company. And if you want to put the DBA in there too, then you can. But you should always use legal names for legal contracts.
Yeah, this question is from Brian. A lot of documents and contracts nowadays you can sign electronically. Is there anything to consider with regards to signing as a member or manager when you're doing something electronically versus hand signatures? Or?
You know, one thing that you run into is often when someone else presents you a contract, they will not have the signature block correct. So there might just be, for instance, a line for, for your company, but they don't put the company. I always write my company name in there and then by Brian Rogers, so it's clear that my company is actually the party to the contract. When you're dealing with things electronically, you may not be able to easily, mark up the contract, so you might go back to them or whatnot. But that does bring up an interesting issue. Since 99, 2000, electronic signatures are, in most cases, just as enforceable as wet ink signatures, which really is great because it makes business a lot easier. I know with my own engagement agreements, I always send them out for electronic signature, and it's just a lot more convenient for everybody. Oh, we got one back here.
The articles of organization, does that get filed with any government or any entity outside of the LLC?
The articles of organization are filed with the Secretary of State of the state of your organization, but the operating agreement will not be filed with anybody. So, but for the most part, unless you're a professional organization or something like that, you don't file your articles with anyone but the Secretary of State.
Thanks to both of you. What are the pros and cons of starting a new LLC? Like if you already have an LLC and you don't really want to sign everything with your LLC DBA, could you just start another LLC, or is there a benefit to having a long-lasting LLC in the eyes of the state, et cetera?
As I understand it, how long your domain name is important for search engine results, but I don't know of any instance where the age of your company is beneficial. So, in a lot of instances, if you're starting a new company, it's better just to form a new LLC. You've got liability issues, from the old company that you might be bringing into the new one if you don't do it that way. So, in most cases, it's better just to, probably better just to form a new company.
And with that, there is a benefit as you can put in business since however long it is, and you're not just the new guy. But like Brian says, to get a clean start, because so many LLCs are not run properly, they don't have the proper documentation, they haven't been doing things well, then it's important to make that one of your considerations in whether or not to do that. You look at the liabilities in the past. Sometimes it's easier if your books are a total mess to just start over or call Lori and have her help you straighten them out. And sometimes, Lori, would you agree it's easier just to start with a new company than try and fix the old one? So, Dale.
Yeah, at one time, some states didn't allow one-member LLCs. Is that still the case? And what ramifications does that have if you're looking at becoming multi-state or extending beyond the borders of the state in which you create the LLC?
Yeah, early in the lives, LLCs are relatively new inventions. From, I think, the 90s is when they were actually invented. Early on, due to certain tax rules, there were features of LLCs that you don't see anymore. Several years ago, the IRS enacted or adopted check-the-box regulations, which makes it much easier to navigate those things. In Missouri, you can have a single-member LLC. Every state that I know of, you can have a single-member LLC. So, and I think we're out of time. Thanks.